The footage stuttered 3 frames, always the same 3 frames, before Marcus Reese's body hit the concrete. Kiana's finger hovered over the space bar of her laptop. The Seoul apartment dark except for the screen's cold glow painting her face in shades of grief. 2:47 a.m. She'd watched it 63 times tonight. 64 now as she hit play again. The warehouse. Port of Busan. 6 months ago. Marcus stumbled backward. Hands raised. Mouth forming words the security camera couldn't capture. Then the muzzle flash, white hot. Blooming like a deadly flower. Her brother's lips moved one last time, and she'd paid a fortune to have it enhanced. Audio extracted from the vibration of his vocal cords. One word. Just one. Always a name. Damien. Kiana slammed the laptop shut, her hands trembling. Not from fear. Never fear. From the kind of rage that had calcified in her bones, turning her marrow to stone over 6 months of planning, training, becoming someone else entirely. The CIA had closed Marcus's case. Occupational hazard. They'd written in sterile government speak. Her brother, brilliant, reckless Marcus, who'd been investigating arms trafficking routes through East Asia, was reduced to a file number and a flag-draped coffin. But Kiana wasn't CIA anymore. She crossed to the window, looking out over Itaewon's neon-soaked streets. Seoul had swallowed her whole, made her anonymous in its sprawling belly of expats and night markets. Somewhere in the city, Kang Dae-hyun, Damien Kang, to those who pretended his empire was legitimate, the man who she thought killed her brother breathed free air, slept in silk sheets, woke up with blood on his hands that never seemed to stain. Not for much longer, though, she whispered to herself. Her phone buzzed. A single message from an encrypted number. Tomorrow night. Underground ring. Hongdae District. Don't be late. Kiana's reflection stared back at her from the window glass. A woman Marcus wouldn't recognize. She'd cut her natural hair into a sleek bob, trained her body into a weapon sharper than it had ever been in Langley. The sister who used to laugh at his terrible jokes had been buried alongside him. What remained was a ghost wearing Kiana Reese's face, and ghosts had only one purpose: haunting. The underground fighting ring smelled like sweat, blood, and desperation. Kiana descended the concrete steps into the repurposed parking garage, the bass from cheap speakers rattling her ribs. 200 people, maybe more, pressed against a makeshift cage in the center. Money changed hands in shadows. This was Seoul's underbelly, where the city's gleaming surface gave way to old grudges and older violence. You sure about this? Jinwoo's voice cut through the noise. Kiana didn't turn. She'd studied Damien's right-hand man for weeks. Loyal to a fault, suspicious by nature, the kind of man who slept with a gun under his pillow and trusted no one, not even himself. I don't do anything I'm not sure about, she replied in perfect Korean, each word crisp and deliberate. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. American. Does it matter? It matters to him. Jinwoo gestured toward the VIP booth overlooking the cage, a raised platform where 3 men sat in leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. And there, in the center, lounged Kang Dae-hyun. Kiana's breath didn't catch. She wouldn't allow it. But something shifted in her chest, a gear clicking into place as she finally laid eyes on the man who'd haunted her every waking moment. He was younger than she'd expected, early 30s, maybe, with the kind of face that Korean dramas built franchises around. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that missed nothing, hair styled with calculated carelessness. He wore a black suit with no tie, the top button undone, looking like he'd stepped out of a boardroom and into this underground hell for entertainment. But it was his stillness that struck her. While the men beside him shouted at the fighters, Damien simply watched. A king surveying his kingdom, bored by the violence he'd seen 1,000 times before. 3 fights, Jinwoo said, pulling her attention back. Win all 3, you get an audition. Lose even 1, you crawl back to whatever hole you came from. Kiana shrugged off her jacket. Underneath, she wore a simple black sports bra and compression pants. Every eye in the garage found her immediately. The only woman, black and beautiful and completely out of place in this testosterone-soaked pit. She heard the whispers, the laughs, felt the disbelief ripple through the crowd. Good Let them underestimate her. Who's first? She asked. Jinwoo's smile was all teeth. All three, at once. The crowd erupted. Someone cut the music. In the sudden silence, Kiana heard her own heartbeat, steady and slow, meditative almost. This was familiar ground, violence she understood, could control, could shape into something useful. 3 men entered the cage. Big, scarred, the kind who'd grown up fighting for every meal. They looked at her like a problem easily solved. Kiana rolled her shoulders and stepped through the cage door. In the VIP booth, Damien Kong leaned forward for the first time all night. The first man rushed her immediately, a mistake born of ego. Kiana sidestepped, used his momentum against him, and drove her elbow into his kidney with surgical precision. He went down gasping. 8 seconds. The second man was smarter, circling, looking for an opening. She gave him one, a deliberately slow guard on her left side. He took the bait, throwing a haymaker that would have separated her head from her shoulders. She ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and delivered 3 strikes in rapid succession. Throat, solar plexus, knee. He collapsed like a building with its foundation removed. 15 seconds. The third man hesitated. Smart enough to be afraid now, stupid enough to still try. He grabbed for her, trying to use his size advantage. Kiana let him get close, then demonstrated exactly why Krav Maga didn't care about weight classes. She broke his grip, swept his legs, and had him in a chokehold before his back hit the mat. Tap, she whispered in his ear, tightening her hold just enough to make the point. Or sleep. He tapped frantically. 23 seconds. Total. The garage exploded into chaos. Shouts, curses, money changing hands again as bets dissolved into arguments. But Kiana only had eyes for the VIP booth. Damien Kong stood now, hands in his pockets, that handsome face still unreadable. But his eyes, God, his eyes were fixed on her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve, an equation that didn't balance. Jinwoo appeared beside him, leaning in to whisper something. Damien shook his head once, sharp and definitive. Then he started down the stairs toward the cage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Whatever Damien Kong was, criminal, businessman, monster, he commanded a gravity that bent everything around him. People didn't just fear him, they respected him in that primal way humans respected apex predators. He stopped at the cage door. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected, and something about him radiated a cold sort of elegance, like winter personified, beautiful and deadly. Name, he said. His voice was deeper than in the recordings she'd studied, with that particular Seoul accent that spoke of old money and older power. Kiana Reese. American. When it's convenient. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. And when it's not? I'm whoever I need to be. Damien studied her for a long moment, and Kiana felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. He was looking past the surface, she realized, trying to see what machinery turned beneath. You fight like someone with nothing to lose, he finally said. Kiana held his stare, her pulse steady despite standing 3 feet from her brother's killer. Maybe I don't. Everyone has something to lose, Ms. Reese. The question is whether you're willing to lose it for the right price. He glanced at Jinwoo. Put her on the schedule. Trial period. 2 weeks. Sir, Jinwoo started. 2 weeks, Damien repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Those dark eyes found Kiana again. Welcome to the Biko Syndicate. Try not to disappoint me. He turned to leave, and Kiana's hand moved to the knife sheathed at the small of her back. 1 throw. Center mass. It would be so easy, so satisfyingly simple. But Marcus deserved better than easy. He deserved the truth dragged into the light. Damien's empire dismantled brick by brick, his reputation destroyed before his life ended. She let her hand fall. Mr. Kong, she called out. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. I won't. Something flickered in his expression, interest maybe or recognition, like he saw something in her that reminded him of himself. Then he was gone, swallowed by his entourage and the Seoul night beyond. Kiana stood alone in the cage, surrounded by the ghosts of fights already finished, and allowed herself one small smile. The game had finally begun. Soul lovers, if you are new here, welcome. Kindly hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our mind-blowing stories. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is right now. Let's go back to Damien and Kiana's story now. Day 3, and Kiana already wanted to kill Minjun. Not because of the assignment, though shadowing Damien Kong through 14 hours of meetings, weapon inspections, and thinly veiled threats disguised as business negotiations tested every ounce of her patience. No, Minjun earned her murderous thoughts the old-fashioned way, by being an asshole. "Coffee's cold," he said, sliding the cup across the security office table with deliberate slowness. "Real bodyguards know the boss takes it hot, but I guess they do things differently in America." Kiana caught the cup before it could spill, her reflexes making the save look effortless. The other bodyguards, 6 men who'd worked for Damien for years, watched with barely concealed amusement. She was the outsider, the interloper, the American woman who'd somehow fought her way into their sacred circle. "In America," Kiana said, her voice flat as winter ice, "we're taught not to waste time on petty bullshit, but I guess loyalty looks different here." Minjun's face darkened. He was early 40s, built like a boxer gone to seed, with scar tissue around his eyes that spoke of a violent past. Second in command of Damien's personal security, he'd made it clear from day one that Kiana's presence was a personal insult. "You want to say that again? Enough." Jinwoo's command cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Kong is leaving for the shipyard in 10 minutes. Reese, you're with him. Minjun, you're on perimeter." The demotion was subtle but unmistakable. Minjun's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth, but he nodded once and left, shouldering past Kiana with enough force to make his point. Jinwoo waited until the others filed out before speaking. "He'll try to get you killed. Accidentally, of course." "I know. And you're not worried?" Kiana met his gaze. Jinwoo was harder to read than the others, intelligent, calculating, absolutely devoted to Damien in a way that went beyond employment. She'd done her homework. Jinwoo had been with Damien for 8 years, since before the Biko Syndicate became one of Seoul's dominant organizations. "I'm more worried about disappointing your boss," she said carefully. Something flickered in Jinwoo's expression. Almost approval. "Good. Because Mr. Kong doesn't tolerate disappointment." He paused at the door. "The coffee thing?" He noticed. "Takes it black, no sugar, hot enough to burn. You've got 5 minutes." The door closed behind him, and Kiana exhaled slowly. Every interaction here was a test, every word weighed and measured. She'd infiltrated terrorist cells in Yemen, posed as an arms dealer in Prague. But this was different, because every time she looked at Damien Kong, she saw Marcus's last moment, heard his dying word. "Damien." Her phone buzzed. A text from the number that had gotten her into the underground fight. "Any progress?" Kiana deleted it without responding. Her CIA contacts wanted intel, wanted her to feed them information about Damien's operations. But this wasn't about building a case. This was about justice that courtrooms couldn't deliver. This was about revenge. The Incheon shipyard stretched along the waterfront like a steel graveyard, container cranes rising against the gray sky like the fossilized remains of giants. Damien's black Mercedes pulled up to a warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside but thrummed with quiet activity within. Kiana exited first, scanning the perimeter with practiced efficiency. 2 men on the roof, 3 at ground level, all armed, all watching her with the same suspicious calculation. Damien emerged from the car, and the air seemed to shift around him. He wore a charcoal suit today, perfectly tailored, looking more like a CEO than a crime lord. But Kiana had learned quickly that Damien Kang's greatest weapon wasn't the gun she knew he carried or the small army at his command. It was the way he made people want to please him, want to prove themselves worthy of his attention. Dangerous. That kind of charisma was more lethal than any bullet. "Status," Damien said without looking at her. "Clear on the north side. Minjun's team has east and west. Jinwoo's inside with the sellers. And you trust Minjun to do his job despite hating you?" So he had noticed. I trust him to value his life more than his pride. You don't strike me as forgiving of failure. Damien's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Perceptive. He started toward the warehouse entrance, and Kiana fell into step beside him. Tell me, Ms. Reese, why did you really come to Korea? Her heart rate stayed steady. She'd prepared for this question, rehearsed the answer until it felt like truth. I needed to disappear. From what? People who wanted me dead. Ah! They passed through a door into the warehouse's main floor, where shipping containers were stacked 3 high. And you thought Seoul was far enough? I thought Seoul was profitable enough. Revenge is expensive. That made him stop. Damien turned to face her fully, and up close, Kiana could see the details that photographs missed. The tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes held depths like dark water, the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders that suggested he never truly relaxed. Who are you planning to kill? He asked, voice soft but deadly serious. Does it matter? It matters if it interferes with my business. Kiana held his gaze. Let him see calculated danger but nothing specific. Nothing true. Someone from my past. When I find them, they'll regret it. But business comes first. Always. Something changed in Damien's expression. Not suspicion, more like understanding. Recognition of ambition he could work with. Good, he said quietly. Stay focused. These negotiations might get complicated. The meeting room was in the warehouse's back corner. A makeshift office with a metal table, folding chairs, and enough weapons visible to start a small war. Jinwoo stood by the window, hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. Across the table sat 3 men in expensive suits, their body language screaming Yakuza even without the telltale tattoos peeking from their collars. Mr. Kong, the center man said, his Korean heavily accented with Japanese. Always a pleasure. Tanaka-san. Damien took his seat with fluid grace. I trust the shipment met your specifications? The shipment was perfect as always. Tanaka's smile didn't reach his eyes. However, there's been a complication. Kiana's instinct screamed. She shifted her weight imperceptibly, ready to move. Jinwoo caught her eye, gave the slightest nod. He felt it too, the wrongness saturating the air like ozone before a lightning strike. What kind of complication? Damien asked, his tone still conversational. But Kiana noticed his fingers drumming once against the table. Tell maybe, or a signal. Our mutual friend in Busan sends his regards, Tanaka said, and the world exploded into violence. The window shattered. Jinwoo dove left as bullets chewed through the space where he'd been standing. Tanaka's men drew weapons with practiced speed, but Kiana was faster. She grabbed Damien's chair and yanked him backward as the table erupted in splinters. They hit the ground together, Kiana covering his body with hers as automatic fire raked the room. Her training took over assess, respond, survive. 3 shooters on the roof. Tanaka's men turning traitor. Jinwoo pinned down behind a desk. Northwest corner, Damien said calmly, like they were discussing dinner plans instead of fighting for their lives. Escape route. Go. Not without. That's an order, Ms. Reese. Kiana's hand found the Glock at her hip. Respectfully, sir. Fuck your order. She rose just enough to return fire, 2 quick shots that dropped the nearest attacker. Then she was moving, dragging Damien with her toward the cover of a shipping container. Bullets sparked off metal. Someone screamed. They made it behind the container, pressed against rusted steel, breathing hard. Damien's eyes were bright with adrenaline, focused and alive in a way she hadn't seen before. This was his element, chaos and violence and split-second decisions. Jinwoo, he called out. Alive, came the response. 3 hostiles down. More coming through the east entrance. Damien swore in Korean, rapid-fire curses that would have made a sailor blush. Then he looked at Kiana, and something passed between them. An understanding that words couldn't capture. Can you cover me to the northwest corner? Can you run fast enough? His smile was sharp as broken glass. Try to keep up. They moved as one. Kiana laid down suppressing fire while Damien sprinted for the corner exit, his movements fluid despite the tailored suit. She dropped 2 more attackers, felt a bullet whisper past her ear close enough to kiss. Then Damien was at the door, and he was turning back for her, and Kiana saw the shooter on the catwalk above raise his rifle. No time to think. She threw herself forward, tackled Damien through the doorway as the bullet meant for him tore through her left shoulder instead. The pain was white-hot, blinding. She hit the ground outside and rolled, came up with her gun still raised despite the blood soaking her shirt. Damien caught her before she could fall, his grip iron-strong. "You're hit." "I'm fine. Move." They ran. Behind them, the warehouse erupted into a full firefight as reinforcements arrived. Minjun's team, finally, and more of Damien's men flooding in from hidden positions. But Kiana barely registered it. Her world had narrowed to putting one foot in front of the other, Damien's arm around her waist, the BMW waiting 50 yards away. They made it. Jinwoo was already behind the wheel, the engine roaring. They piled into the back seat and the car screamed away from the shipyard, leaving carnage in their wake. "Hospital," Jinwoo said. "No." Damien's voice cut through the fog of pain settling over Kiana. "My place. No records, no questions. She needs. I'll handle it. Drive." Kiana tried to focus, but the adrenaline was fading, leaving only the fire in her shoulder and the disconcerting warmth of Damien's hands pressing against her wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "You moved before you even thought about it," he said softly, almost to himself. "Why?" She wanted to lie, should have lied, but the blood loss was making her honest. "Because you weren't supposed to die today. I'm your employer, not your friend. You should have let me take the bullet. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work, Kiana Reese?" She met his eyes, saw genuine confusion there. Like the concept of someone protecting him without ulterior motive was foreign, incomprehensible. "I don't know yet," she whispered, and let the darkness take her. Kiana woke to silk sheets and the smell of antiseptic. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the mission, forgot the carefully constructed lies, forgot everything except the dull throb in her shoulder and the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Recessed lighting, minimalist design, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Seoul's glittering skyline. This wasn't a hospital. This was a sanctuary. "You're awake." She turned her head too quickly, and the movement sent lightning through her shoulder. Damien sat in a leather chair beside the bed, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading glasses perched on his nose as he examined a tablet. He looked different like this, softer, almost human. The ruthless crime lord replaced by something uncomfortably close to a regular man having a quiet evening. "How long?" Her voice came out rough. 6 hours. The bullet went clean through, missed the major arteries. "You were lucky." He set down the tablet and removed his glasses, and the vulnerability disappeared like smoke. "My personal physician patched you up. 12 stitches, antibiotics, painkillers. You'll live." Kiana pushed herself up despite the protest from her body. She was wearing a black silk pajama top, definitely not hers, and her weapons were gone. Her phone, her knife, everything. "Where?" "Your belongings are secured. Standard protocol." Damien stood, moving to a side table where a glass of water waited. He brought it to her, and their fingers brushed as she took it. "You saved my life today. It's my job." "No. Your job is to stand between me and threats you can anticipate." "That sniper." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You moved before the threat was visible. Pure instinct. That's not training, Ms. Reese. That's something else." Kiana drank deeply, buying time to construct her response. The water was cold, perfect, and she realized how parched she'd been. "Maybe I'm just good at my job. Maybe." He studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Or maybe you have your own reasons for keeping me alive." Her pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. "Everyone has reasons for everything they do. Isn't that what you said?" A ghost of a smile. "You were listening." "I'm always listening, Mr. Kong." "Damien," he corrected, and something about the way he said it, soft, almost intimate, made the room feel smaller. When someone takes a bullet for you, titles seem unnecessarily formal. Before she could respond, he moved to the windows, hands sliding into his pockets. The lights of Seoul spread out behind him like a constellation fallen to earth. From this height, what, 40th floor? 50th? The city looked peaceful, clean. Nothing like the blood-soaked warehouse they'd barely escaped. The Tanaka family has been dealt with, Damien said conversationally, like discussing the weather. Jinwoo is thorough in these matters. The shooters on the roof were hired locally, small-time criminals easily traced. But the order came from higher up the chain. The Busan connection Tanaka mentioned? Very good. He glanced back at her, impressed. Most people don't remember details when they're being shot at. But you catalog everything, don't you? Every word, every movement. Kiana said nothing. He was profiling her, searching for the edges of her mask. The Chongryong Syndicate, Damien continued. Blue Dragons. They've been pushing into our territory for months, testing boundaries. Today was their declaration of war. His reflection in the glass looked tired suddenly, weighted down by invisible burdens. They're ruthless, well-funded, and they don't play by the old rules. No honor, no codes. Just blood and money. The Blue Dragons. Kiana filed the name away carefully, keeping her face neutral even as her mind raced. She'd focused so completely on Damien, she hadn't considered other players. What if she'd missed something? What if... No. Marcus had said Damien's name. The evidence pointed to him. She couldn't let doubt creep in now. You should rest, Damien said, turning from the window. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. Jinwoo will have your things brought up tomorrow. I can go back to my apartment. No. The word was gentle but absolute. You were injured protecting me. That makes you a target now. The Blue Dragons will want to know who you are, what you mean to me. Until this situation is resolved, you stay here, where I can ensure your safety. It wasn't a request. But Kiana found she didn't want to argue. Staying close to Damien meant access to his files, his secrets, his vulnerabilities. This was an opportunity her mission needed. So why did it feel like a trap she was willingly walking into? Fine, she agreed. But I'm not an invalid. Tomorrow, I'm back on duty. We'll see what the doctor says. Damien. We'll see what the doctor says, Kiana. He moved to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Bathroom through that door. If you need anything, press the intercom button on the nightstand. Someone will respond immediately. He was leaving, giving her space, privacy, when he could have demanded answers or gratitude or any number of things. The consideration felt wrong coming from a man she'd spent 6 months painting as a monster. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Damien turned back, backlit by the hallway lights. Why what? Why trust me? I've been here 3 days. You don't know anything about me, not really. I could be working for your enemies. Could be planning to slit your throat while you sleep. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. You're right, he finally said. You could be. But you're not. How do you know? Because, Damien said, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. She saw the man beneath. Scarred, suspicious, alone in ways that wealth and power couldn't fix. People who want me dead don't throw themselves in front of bullets. They wait for someone else to pull the trigger and then celebrate quietly. You. He shook his head, almost amused. You're dangerous, Kiana Reese, but not in the way you think. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click. Kiana sat in the enormous bed, surrounded by silk and luxury that felt obscene given where she'd come from, what she'd done. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her heartbeat, and she welcomed the pain. It was real, grounding, something she could understand. Not like the confusion tangling through her thoughts. Not like the way her hands had moved to protect him without conscious decision. Not like the warmth that had bloomed in her chest when he'd said her name. Focus, she commanded herself. This is what he does. Makes you feel special, seen, until you do anything for him. It's manipulation. Nothing more. But even as she thought it, She remembered his reflection in the window. The weariness, the loneliness. She couldn't afford to see him as human. Not if she wanted to finish what she'd started. 3 days passed in a strange sort of domesticity. Kiana healed faster than the doctor predicted, a benefit of her conditioning and sheer stubbornness. Damien's penthouse became her gilded cage, 40 floors above the city, filled with art she didn't understand and silence she couldn't escape. He was gone most days, managing his empire, dealing with the fallout from the Tanaka betrayal. But the nights he came home. The first night, Kiana was in the kitchen at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, when Damien walked in. He'd loosened his tie, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. They'd stared at each other for a long moment, two predators uncertain of territory. Insomnia? He'd asked. Old habit. I don't sleep well in new places. He'd nodded, moved to the bar, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler. Then, after a pause, poured a second glass and slid it across the marble counter to her. They'd drunk in silence, and it had felt like a truce. The second night, she found him on the balcony, staring at the city with that same distant expression she'd seen in the window reflection. She almost left him alone. Should have left him alone. Instead, she joined him at the railing. Do you ever regret it? She'd asked. The life you've built? Damien had been quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, every day, and never. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. The third night. Tonight. Kiana found him in his study, surrounded by papers and half-empty glasses. She'd been exploring, telling herself it was reconnaissance, knowing it was curiosity. The study door had been open, an invitation or a trap. You should be resting, Damien said without looking up. So should you. I'll rest when I'm dead. He signed something, set it aside, finally met her eyes. Which, at the current rate, might be sooner than expected. Kiana stepped into the room, drawn by something she couldn't name. The study was all dark wood and leather, smelling of old books and expensive liquor. Personal in a way the rest of the penthouse wasn't. There were photographs here. A woman who had to be his mother, young and beautiful, holding a small boy. A father who looked nothing like Damien, stern and distant even in pictures. And orchids, a dozen of them, rare and exquisite, arranged throughout the room in pots that probably cost more than cars. Your mother's favorite? Kiana guessed, touching a white bloom delicately. Damien's expression shifted, surprise, then something softer. How did you? The photo, the way you look at them, like they're people, not plants. He stood, moved to where she was examining the orchids. This close, she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that made her think of winter forests and dark water. She died when I was 12, he said quietly. Poisoned by a rival family trying to weaken my father's position. It worked. He became paranoid, ruthless. By the time I was 16, he'd turned the Biko Syndicate into a prison instead of a family. His fingers brushed the orchid petals, achingly gentle. She used to say orchids were proof that beautiful things could survive in harsh conditions. That strength and beauty weren't opposites. She sounds wise. She was. And it got her killed. The pain in his voice was raw, unguarded. Kiana recognized it because she carried the same wound, the kind that never truly healed, just scarred over and throbbed on cold nights. The poison, she said carefully. Is that why? She stopped, uncertain how to ask, but Damien understood. His laugh was bitter. Why I can't have children? Yes. Clever, wasn't it? They couldn't kill my father outright, so they killed his legacy instead. The doctors tried everything. Turns out, some damage is permanent. He poured another drink, downed it in one swallow. The alcohol was armor, Kiana realized, another mask to hide behind. Does it bother you? She asked. Not being able to fulfill my destiny as a crime lord with heirs to inherit my blood empire? His smile was sharp enough to cut. Every single day. In this world, strength is measured by legacy. I built the Biko Syndicate from my father's paranoid ruins into something powerful. something that matters. But without an heir, it's all temporary. When I die, everything I've built dies with me. Kiana absorbed this, understood what he wasn't saying. He was vulnerable in ways his enemies couldn't see. Incomplete in a culture that valued lineage above almost everything else. Maybe legacy isn't about blood, she offered carefully, keeping her own secrets buried deep. Perhaps. He moved closer, and Kiana's back pressed against his desk. But tell me, Kiana Reese, what will your legacy be? The question felt like a test. She met his gaze, let calculated ambition show through. I'm still writing it. Good answer. His hand came up, fingertips brushing the curve of her jaw. The touch was feather-light, almost reverent, and it made something in her chest crack open. This was dangerous. She was getting too close, feeling too much, but she couldn't pull away. You're dangerous, he murmured, echoing his words from that first night. But so am I. Maybe that's why this feels inevitable. The kiss, when it came, was soft, questioning. Nothing like the violence that defined both their lives. Kiana's hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pulling him closer and pushing him away. This was wrong. This was a betrayal of everything she'd sworn over Marcus's grave. But God help her, it felt like the only honest thing in her world of lies. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Kiana woke to find herself alone in Damien's bed. She'd fallen asleep there after the kiss. After several kisses, if she was honest. Curled against his chest while he traced absent patterns on her shoulder, careful to avoid her healing wound. They talked until dawn about books, about travel, about the weight of choices. Surface things. Safe things. Nothing real. Nothing true. A note waited on the pillow beside her, written in precise handwriting. Stay. No work today. Just stay. D. Kiana crumpled the note in her fist, emotions warring inside her. This wasn't the plan. She wasn't supposed to feel this ache when he left, this anticipation of his return. She was supposed to be cold, focused, a scalpel aimed at his heart. Instead, she was bleeding out from wounds she'd inflicted on herself. Her phone buzzed with a message from her CIA contact. Clock's ticking. We need intel or we pull you out. She stared at the words until they blurred. Intel, right? That's what she was here for. Not for silk sheets and gentle touches and conversations that made her forget why she'd come to Seoul in the first place. Kiana dragged herself from bed and into the shower, letting scalding water punish her skin. She needed to think clearly, needed to separate the mission from the man. They weren't the same thing. Couldn't be the same thing. But when she emerged 30 minutes later and found Damien in the kitchen, cooking breakfast in a black t-shirt and sweatpants, looking unfairly domestic and human, her resolve wavered like candlelight in wind. You're still here, he said, and the relief in his voice was unmistakable. Your note was very persuasive. He smiled. A real smile, not the calculated ones he wore in meetings, and something in Kiana's chest constricted. Sit. I make excellent French toast. She obeyed, watching him move through the kitchen with the same fluid grace he brought to violence. It was surreal, sitting at his breakfast bar while Seoul woke up 40 floors below, pretending they were normal people having a normal morning. When did you learn to cook? She asked. My mother. Before? He paused, flipping the toast with practiced efficiency. She believed powerful men should be self-sufficient, that depending on others for basic needs made you weak. He plated the food, drizzled it with syrup, and set it before her. Eat. You're still recovering. The French toast was perfect. Of course it was. Come somewhere with me today, Damien said suddenly. No bodyguards, no business. He seemed to struggle with the concept. Just us. Two people who might be something more than employer and employee. Every tactical instinct screamed at her to refuse. But the word that came out was, where? His smile returned, brilliant and devastating. You'll see. They took his motorcycle, a vintage Ducati he kept in the building's private garage. Kiana wrapped her arms around his waist as they carved through Seoul's morning traffic, feeling the flex of his muscles, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He drove like he fought, controlled chaos, always in command. They ended up in Bukshan-Hanok village, the old traditional neighborhood clinging to its history amidst the modern city. Tourists crowded the narrow streets, but Damien navigated to a quieter section, parking outside a small tea house that looked ancient. "My mother used to bring me here," he explained, helping Kiana off the bike. His hand lingered on her waist, and she didn't pull away. "It's been in the same family for 200 years. Best tea in Seoul, and they don't care who you are. Money and power stop at that door." Inside, the tea house was a sanctuary. Low tables, cushioned floors, paper screens filtering soft light. An elderly woman greeted Damien with genuine warmth, speaking rapid Korean that Kiana followed easily. "She says you're prettier than the last girl I brought here," Damien translated, though Kiana had understood perfectly. "When was that?" 12 years ago. My mother, the day before she died." They sat. Tea came. Delicate porcelain cups filled with something that smelled like flowers and tasted like memory. Damien was different here, relaxed in ways she'd never seen. The mask fully removed, revealing the boy he'd been before violence and necessity had reforged him into something harder. "Tell me something true," he said quietly. "Just one thing. No walls, no performance. Just you." Kiana's throat tightened. She couldn't risk it. But the way he looked at her, open, vulnerable, asking for connection in the only way he knew how, made her want to give him something real. "I'm afraid," she said finally, "of wanting things I can't have, of becoming someone I don't recognize." It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. Damien reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "I'm afraid too, of trusting the wrong person, of being alone in a room full of people for the rest of my life." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But I think, with you, maybe I don't have to be." God, she was gonna hell for this. They spent the day wandering Seoul's hidden corners, art galleries Damien loved, street food vendors he'd known since childhood, a bookshop where the owner kept a chair reserved for him by the window. He bought her things without asking. A scarf she'd admired, a book of Korean poetry, orchid earrings that matched the ones in his study. "You're spoiling me," she protested. "Yes," he agreed simply. "Is that a problem?" It should have been. But watching him laugh at something she'd said, his guard completely down, Kiana realized she was in far deeper than attraction or manipulation. She was falling in love with him. Completely, irrevocably, catastrophically in love. And that terrified her more than any bullet. Evening found them back at the penthouse. Damien poured wine, and they stood on the balcony watching the city transition from day to night. Seoul sparkled below them, millions of lives being lived in the spaces between darkness and light. "Thank you," Kiana said, "for today, for everything." Damien turned to her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Kiana, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words were simple, devastating. "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I don't do anything halfway, and I need you to know." She kissed him, desperate, hungry, pouring 6 months of grief and confusion and impossible hope into the contact. He responded immediately, hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer like he could merge them into one person. They made it to his bedroom. Clothes fell away like shed skin. And when he moved inside her, Kiana felt something inside her chest that had been frozen since Marcus died finally crack open. "Stay," Damien whispered against her lips afterward, both of them tangled in sheets and each other. "Not as my bodyguard. Just stay." "I can't," she said, even as her heart screamed yes. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." But how could she? How could she explain that she'd come here to destroy him, that everything between them was built on a foundation of lies, that even now she didn't know if he was innocent or if her heart was simply betraying her judgment? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from her CIA contact. "Final warning. Intel or extraction. 24 hours. Kiana stared at it, then at Damien sleeping peacefully beside her, and made her choice. She would give them something. One piece of intel, one sacrifice to buy time while she figured out the truth. The next morning, while Damien was in a meeting, Kiana accessed his encrypted files using passwords she'd carefully observed over weeks. Her hands shook as she navigated through layers of security, each click feeling like a betrayal. There are details about his next major shipment. $50 million in weapons moving through Incheon port in 3 days. She copied the information, encrypted it, sent it anonymously to the authorities and to her CIA contact. It was a controlled burn. No one would die. Damien would take a financial hit, but he'd survive. And she'd have bought herself time to find proof of what really happened to Marcus. The plan was perfect, logical, necessary. So why did it feel like she'd just signed everyone's death warrant? Kiana closed the laptop, covered her tracks, and returned to the guest room. In the bathroom, she stared at herself in the mirror. At the woman wearing Keanu Reeves' face but living someone else's life. Who was she anymore? The sister seeking vengeance? The spy completing her mission? Or the woman who'd woken up in Damien Kang's arms and felt, for the first time in 6 months, like she might survive her grief? She didn't know. And that uncertainty was eating her alive. 3 days later, the shipment was seized. Kiana was in Damien's office when the call came through. She watched his face transform. Confusion, then anger, then something colder, more dangerous. Jinwoo burst in moments later, face grim. Sir, we have a mole. Someone leaked the shipment details. Authorities were waiting. They took everything. Damien's jaw clenched. How many people knew the specifics? Inner circle only. Maybe 10 people total. Jinwoo's eyes swept the room, landing briefly on Kiana before moving on. I'm implementing full security protocols. Background checks on everyone, surveillance review, communications audit. Kiana's blood ran cold. A full audit would uncover her tracks. She'd been careful, but not that careful. She had days, maybe a week, before they found the digital breadcrumbs leading back to her. Do it, Damien said. I want answers. Someone betrayed us, and I want to know who. Over the next week, Kiana watched Damien's organization tear itself apart from the inside. Accusations flew. Trust evaporated. Men who'd worked together for years now looked at each other with suspicion. And through it all, Damien grew colder. More distant. The warmth she'd glimpsed disappeared behind walls of ice. And she realized with crushing certainty that she'd destroyed something precious before she'd even understood what it was. She tried to continue as normal, standing guard, attending meetings, pretending everything was fine. But she could feel Jinwoo's eyes on her more frequently, could sense the net tightening. It was only a matter of time. 14 days after the sabotage, Kiana returned to her apartment. She'd moved back out of the penthouse, claiming she needed her own space, really needing an escape route when everything collapsed. The apartment was dark. She flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. Every instinct screamed danger. Kiana reached for her weapon, but a voice stopped her cold. I wouldn't. Minjun stepped from the shadows, gun trained on her chest. Behind him, 3 more of Damien's men emerged. Hands where I can see them. Slowly, Kiana complied, mind racing through scenarios. She could take Minjun, maybe one other, but not all 4. Not without getting shot. What's this about? She asked, voice steady despite her hammering heart. You tell me. Jinwoo appeared in the doorway, and his expression was carved from stone. We found the breach, traced it back to access logs, keystroke patterns, timing. You were very good, Kiana. But not good enough. Her stomach dropped. We also found something else, Jinwoo continued, pulling out a folder. Your real identity. Kiana Reese, former CIA operative. Sister of Marcus Reese, killed 6 months ago in Busan while investigating. He paused, and something like sympathy flickered in his eyes. While investigating the Chongryong Syndicate. Not us. The Blue Dragons. The world tilted. What? Marcus was working with us. With Damien. They were building a case against the Blue Dragons together. When Marcus was killed, Damien spent months trying to find who was responsible. Jinwoo closed the folder. You came here for revenge against the wrong man, Kiana. And in the process, you've destroyed the only person who might have helped you get justice for your brother. No, that couldn't be. Mr. Kong wants to see you, Minjun said, his smile cruel. In the detention facility. Now. They cuffed her hands behind her back, led her out of the apartment like a common criminal. And as they drove through Seoul's nighttime streets toward Damien's building, Kiana finally understood the full scope of her catastrophic mistake. She'd fallen in love with an innocent man, and then she'd betrayed him. The detention cell was concrete and fluorescent lighting and the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat like drum thunder. Kiana sat on the metal bench bolted to the wall, tracking time by the meals they brought. Plain rice, water, nothing else. No clock, no windows, just four walls and the weight of her mistakes pressing down like atmosphere. Day 1. She'd tried reasoning with the guards, demanded to see Damien. They'd looked through her like she was already dead. Day 2. She'd searched every inch of the cell for weaknesses. Found none. This place was designed to hold people far more dangerous than her. Day 3. She stopped counting. The isolation was its own kind of torture. Kiana had endured worse in CIA training, sensory deprivation, stress positions, controlled drowning. But this was different. This was waiting for judgment from the one person whose opinion had started to matter more than her mission. She'd destroyed that. Destroyed him. Destroyed any chance of, what? Love? Redemption? A future that didn't end in violence? All of the above. On what might have been day 5, the cell door finally opened. But it wasn't Damien. Jinwoo entered carrying a folder. He looked tired, older than his years. The council meets tonight. They're calling for your execution. Kiana's throat tightened, but she kept her voice level. And Damien? Won't see you. Won't speak about you. He gave one order. Handle it according to syndicate law. Jinwoo sat across from her, the folder unopened on his lap. Betrayal of this magnitude. There's only one punishment. I understand. Do you? Jinwoo's eyes were hard. Do you understand what you've done? That shipment wasn't just money. It was leverage with our allies, protection against our enemies. You didn't just cost us 50 million, you made us look weak. Compromised. Now every rival organization sees blood in the water. Kiana absorbed this, felt the full weight of her actions crash down. You thought wrong. About everything. He opened the folder, showed her photographs. Marcus, alive and smiling, standing next to Damien at what looked like a restaurant. More photos, the two of them reviewing documents, examining evidence, clearly working together. Your brother approached us 8 months ago, Jinwoo explained. He had intel about the Blue Dragons trafficking bioweapons. Wanted our help to stop them. Damien agreed because, he paused. Because it was the right thing to do. Because some lines, even we don't cross. Tears burned Kiana's eyes. Marcus and Damien. Partners. Friends, maybe. When Marcus was killed, Damien blamed himself. Said he should have provided better protection. He's been investigating ever since, trying to finish what your brother started. Jinwoo closed the folder. And you came here with murder in your heart, destroyed everything he'd built. All because you believed a lie the Blue Dragons fed you. How do you know they? Because we found the source. The intel that brought you here was planted by the Chongryong. They wanted exactly what you gave them. Chaos in our organization, Damien distracted and vulnerable. And it worked perfectly. Kiana's hands clenched into fists. She'd been played. Used. Turned into a weapon against the one person who'd actually been trying to avenge Marcus. I need to see him, she said. Please. I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choices. Jinwoo stood. The council meets at midnight. I'm sorry, Kiana. I really am. He left her alone with the photographs of Marcus. Her brilliant, reckless brother who died trying to do the right thing. Who'd trusted Damien Kong when she hadn't. Kiana picked up one photo, traced Marcus's smile with her finger. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I failed you. I failed everything. The hours crawled past. She tried to prepare herself for death, tried to find peace with her choices. Failed at both. Then, Near midnight, the cell door opened again, and Damien walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The tailored suit couldn't hide the exhaustion, the barely controlled fury radiating off him like heat. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, and just stared at her. Kiana stood slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Damien, don't. His voice was ice. Don't say my name like we're friends. Like you didn't spend weeks lying to my face while planning my destruction. I thought you killed Marcus. And that justifies everything? The betrayal? The sabotage? He took a step closer, and she saw it now, the devastation beneath the anger. The hurt. You slept in my bed, Kiana. Let me tell you about my mother, my fears, the parts of myself I've shown no one. And the whole time you were using me. It wasn't all lies, she said desperately. What happened between us, that was real. Was it? Damien's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to draw blood. Or was that just part of the performance? Tell me, when you looked at me, did you see a man or a mark? He moved closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. When we were in bed together, when I was inside you, when you whispered my name like it meant something. His eyes burned into hers. You enjoyed it, didn't you? Playing me, making the fool fall in love while you plotted his destruction. Both. The honesty ripped out of her. At first, you were just the target. But then, God, Damien, then I got to know you. The real you. And everything changed. And I didn't know how to stop it. How to what? Choose between your mission and the truth. He was close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. You made your choice. You chose revenge over everything else. I was wrong. Marcus was working with you. I know that now. The Blue Dragons killed him, not you. They used me, fed me false intel, turned me into their weapon. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry. I would take it all back if I could. But I can't, and now you're going to die. Damien's expression was carved from stone. The council was unanimous. Execution at dawn. Kiana's breath caught. I understand. Do you? Do you understand that I have to be the one to give the order? That I have to stand in front of my people and condemn the woman His voice broke. The woman I fell in love with. You said you were falling in love with me, Kiana whispered. Did you mean it? Or was that just... I meant every word. The admission seemed to hurt him physically. That's why this is killing me. That's why I haven't been able to look at you until now. Because I love you, Kiana Reese. And you've destroyed me anyway. The silence between them was heavy with everything they'd lost. Everything that could never be. There's something you should know, Kiana said finally. The Blue Dragons, they're not finished. They used my sabotage as a distraction for something bigger. Damien's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Before I was captured, I intercepted communications. They're planning to hit your main compound. Tonight, they think you're weakened, distracted. They're coming to finish what they started with Marcus. Convenient timing for this information. I'm not lying. I know you have no reason to believe me, but... She grabbed his arms, desperate. Damien, please. I've destroyed everything between us. I know that. But don't let them kill you too. Don't let them win. He searched her face for a long moment, looking for truth, for any reason to trust her one more time. Why should I believe you? He asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I love you. The words came out broken, raw. Because even if you kill me in the next 5 minutes, I need you to survive. Because Marcus saw something in you worth dying for. And I finally understand what it was. Damien closed his eyes, his jaw working as he fought some internal battle. When he opened them again, they were unreadable. A storm barely contained behind dark depths. The silence stretched between them, suffocating. Heavy with the weight of broken trust and impossible choices. Kiana watched him standing there at the precipice. Trust or execution. Belief or betrayal. Love or justice. His hand moved slowly to his pocket, fingers closing around something. The key, she realized. One turn of that lock and he'd either free her or condemn them both. "Damien," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw everything warring behind his eyes. The boy who'd lost his mother. The man poisoned and left incomplete. The lover who'd opened his heart only to have it shattered. All of him fighting against all of her lies. His fingers tightened around the key. And in that frozen moment, with her life hanging in the balance and everything between them reduced to ash, Kiana held her breath, waiting for a verdict that would determine whether she lived to see another sunrise, or whether love, once broken, could ever be trusted again. To be continued in Part 2. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is. Will Damien choose trust or execution? Will the Blue Dragons attack? Can their love survive the ultimate betrayal? Don't miss what happens next. Part 2 drops soon.